What's the most shocking transformation you've ever seen? My old dean in high school was fucking huge, my freshman year. Probably about 6'8" and 550 pounds. Our school bought a golf cart because he physically could not walk from the east end, where his office was, to the west end. I got into trouble a lot freshman year because of shit that wasn't my fault. And he bailed me out every time because he actually analyzed the situations presented to him, something that had never been done at my previous schools. So I saw him a lot then, but after that year, people knew not to fuck with me, so I didn't see him much. When I graduated from school, I saw him for the first time in years, and I legit gasped. He had lost probably 250 pounds and could actually walk long distances without resting. I was very proud of him. Reply: one of my favorite high school teachers was obese. About 5 years after I graduated, I was on an intercity bus, and this guy comes up to me to chat like he knows me. After some awkward small talk, he finally tells me who he is. He probably lost 150 pounds. I didn't even believe him. He also looked 15 years younger. I had just gotten off a double shift at work and fell asleep. When I woke up, he was off the bus. When I told a friend, still skeptical that it was really him, my friend confirmed he had lost weight and looked completely different. I felt bad for not talking to him more. In my defense, I didn't live in that town anymore, and the bus was not going through that town, so it was odd for him to even be there. I really thought it was some scam. Story number 2. I went to elementary school with a kid who was a little chubby, on the shorter side, wore glasses, didn't really dress in a way that was considered cool, and was kind of bullied by other kids sometimes. I always felt bad for him because he was nice, and I heard some things about his family situation from a girl who lived on his street. Allegedly, he was physically abused by his stepdad. Didn't see him for years after 8th grade, and then ran into him while I was in the Marines, but home on leave when we were 18 or 19. He was also in the Marines and home on leave as well, so we were hanging out one night and bonding over that. Anyway, I totally didn't recognize him at all when I first ran into him. He'd gotten tall, shed the extra pounds, was completely jacked, and his arms were covered in tattoos. If he wasn't such a nice guy, he'd have looked intimidating. Reminds me of a kid I knew growing up in our neighborhood. His parents were the kind of dysfunctional that makes you wonder what they're missing. It certainly wasn't meals or drugs. Both of their kids were weird, deviant, and dangerously stupid. How can I illustrate this? On several occasions, they had rock fights out of boredom, just throwing golf ball-sized chunks of limestone and granite at each other until someone started bleeding bad enough to call it quits. Forever getting suspended in elementary school for things like fighting, wiping a booger on another student, throwing a desk across the classroom because someone stole his pencil, constant disruptions, etc. Some of us in the neighborhood would still try to include them occasionally because they weren't ill-tempered at heart. They just couldn't manage their impulses. Still, they were mostly to be avoided. It was widely speculated they'd end up in prison or worse. I ran into the older brother 10 years later, coming out of a Walmart. Had a normal conversation with a clear-eyed, sane-seeming young man with a trade and the vocabulary of a person who reads books and pays attention. I have no idea what happened in his life during those 10 years, or how his brother turned out, but meeting him was a very pleasant surprise. Unrelated to your overall story, but I was in the Navy. And just one day, I went to do laundry in the barracks, and this dude comes out and holds the door open for me. I say thanks and walk through with my basket. Then, like in a movie, we both stop and just kind of stand there for like 5 seconds before both turning around. For another 5 seconds, we just stare at each other trying to figure out who the fuck each other were. Then we both realized, simultaneously, we were both in the same 4th grade class in a small town in Iowa, roughly 15 years prior. We both moved out of the town after 4th grade, and hadn't seen each other until we were 25 years old at a random petty officer barracks in Virginia Beach, VA. Anyway, your story reminded me of that. Story number 3. A girl I went to school with was always picked on because her parents were poor. Her mother worked a minimum wage job, and her dad didn't work at all. To be honest, I don't know how people even noticed her enough to bully her, as she was always quiet and came in and out of class unnoticed. At school, she always, I hate to say this, took the bullying and never once complained. That's the best way I can describe it. I remember her, as always, of average looks and intelligence while we were at school and very skinny. Once we left school, everybody went their separate ways. Last year, she surfaced on Facebook with a family and a degree from Cambridge University. It turns out she had joined the Army, went through officer training at Sandhurst, and is a captain in the Army Air Corps. She has pictures of her tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. The quiet girl who got bullied was a very intelligent, tough person who, I suppose, we all wanted to be ourselves. It was nice to see. Story number 4. Not my batchmate, but an upperclassman. I used to go to a public high school where everyone was poor or middle class. Absolutely no rich kids. This is in a province in a third world country, so when I say poor, I mean down and out dirt poor. I made friends with this older guy who I always saw on my walk to school. When I asked him where he lived, he would always point up to the mountain. I always thought of it as a joke, but when he didn't show up for class after a really bad storm, rumors spread that his family's house in the mountains got destroyed. He stopped school after that, and I haven't talked to him since. He finished high school the next year and applied to a prestigious university in the country. He took a finance course but had to stop a few times because of financial issues. He graduated 6 years later with honors nonetheless. Now, he's a regional office manager for a bank, and he also owns a small travel agency. The scrawny kid from the mountain became a big-time businessman. Story number 5. I've known my stepbrother since we were little kids. We're in our 50s now. He was born a she. Our families had been close since we were maybe 3. Through a series of divorces, deaths, and a marriage, we ended up becoming family. Growing up, my stepbrother was a shy girl, horribly and clearly uncomfortable in her own skin. When she spoke, she was so quiet you had to strain to make out what she was saying. She was always awkward and socially uncomfortable. Shortly before we became family, she had, at the age of 30 or so, decided to go to medical school. While she was in medical school, she decided to transition. I was living out of the country, and I didn't see her until over a year after the transition. He was not she in any fashion. Thick beard, loud and boisterous, socially confident, and most importantly, happy. He's been happily married for about 15 years now and been tremendously successful in his career. So, when people are against this stuff, I just don't understand. It took this sad person to be pitied and turned them into this happy, confident, successful person. How can there be anything wrong with that? Story number 6. Before and after my mom divorced my dad. Before, she was June Cleaver, dressed nicely, never drank, cooked, gardened, took care of myself and my sister. As soon as she moved out and asked for a separation, it was like a light switch. She became an alcoholic, slept around, didn't take care of herself, and wasn't involved with me and my sister. The person I knew as Mom wasn't anymore. I didn't know who this person was. I guess that's what happens when you are married to a narcissistic, physically abusive, verbally abusive man for 25 years. She's doing better now. Still a completely different person, though, and still an alcoholic. Reply. Something like that happened to my neighbors. They'd moved into our rural development when I was in middle school, and we rode the bus together. 4 kids total. The oldest was a guy a year older than me, the next a girl a year younger. Very yuppie-ish. Both those kids were very smart and probably heading to one of the better state universities. Then Dad left, and Mom went nuts. The house started falling apart. Lots of strange cars in the driveway, lots of men visiting at night. The guy fell in with a bad crowd at school and started drinking and doing drugs. And in high school, the girl got knocked up. I think the mom kind of got herself back together, but it was too late for the kids. Neither went to college. The girl's a single parent to this day, and last I saw, the guy was working at Subway and trying to become a bartender. I obviously don't have the full story, but it was pretty heartbreaking to see. Story number 7. My grandfather's journey with motor neuron disease, ALS, from 2020 to 2022, and especially the last 6 months of his life. He was in the Royal Navy for 33 years as a marine engineer, artificer, rose to warrant officer, but failed the officer's exam by 0.5 points. He was always active, rugged, practical, but also so very alive. So many times, I had the pleasure of sharing dinner with him and the rest of the family at some restaurant or other. He was a great raconteur. When he spoke, you listened. Often, he'd recall his time aboard HMS Coventry in the Falklands War. He danced, he golfed, he lived so vividly. MND began attacking him at the age of 72, focusing almost entirely on his throat muscles. He could still walk with a frame until the end, but by the end he could no longer hold up his head, breathe, drink easily, or eat at all. He was spared the horrific indignity of the disease paralyzing him completely because soon he died at 74. 4 months prior, he had begun going for long drives in his car 10, 15 times a day and at night. As I later realized, he still had his engineer's brain. If I drive with the window open, air is forced into my lungs, and I can breathe better. Everything else, really, though, was gone. Story number 8. I had a very overweight, but super friendly and sweet friend in high school. Not a girly girl. She wore hoodies and cargo pants, her hair always in a bun, and no makeup. She was 2 years younger than me. This comes into play later. We were on the rifle team, and she was extremely good, to the point where she was being scouted by the Olympic sharpshooting team even during her first year. She was automatically varsity level after tryouts. Her dad was a retired USMC sniper scout and had taught her to shoot since she was 6 years old. We lost touch after my senior year. She never responded on AIM after I got to college, and she got rid of her MySpace, pre-Facebook. I thought she was done with social media, and people were no longer in sight, so I just moved on. I don't blame her. People were unkind to her, and she never lost her temper or fought anyone. She just said that those people didn't matter. I went back to visit my old high school after my second year of college, which would have been her senior year of high school. I stopped by the rifle coach's office. He taught health education, and she was there talking with him about the upcoming rifle match state finals. She must have lost 150 pounds, was wearing super skin-tight yoga/activewear, had her hair down in a cute, what I would call choppy bob, and was wearing makeup. She looked like a young Melanie Griffith, circa 1976 Playboy era. My jaw dropped as she saw me and gave me a super hug. Her confidence was beaming, and she was dating her direct rival from another school. They were planning on going to the same university as far as I remember. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more incredible Reddit tales. Share your thoughts or your own experiences in the comments below. I love hearing from you all. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring those amazing stories.